Hello, I'm Bretton, one of our MCAT tutors here at Inspira Advantage, where we help students get into med school and other professional programs. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the highest yield sections on the psych-soc section, classical conditioning, or Pavlovian conditioning. This is a type of learning that occurs when a neutral stimulus is repeatedly paired with an unconditioned stimulus, leading to what we call a conditioned response. This type of learning was first discovered by Ivan Pavlov in the late 19th century. He conducted experiments on dogs to investigate the digestive system, and in the course of his research, he made a remarkable discovery. He noticed that the dogs began to salivate when they saw the lab assistant who fed them, even before the food was presented to him. He realized that the dogs had associated the sound of the lab assistant's footsteps with food, leading to the salivation response. Pavlov's experiments on classical conditioning involved the use of a bell, and food as the unconditioned stimulus. The sound of the bell was initially a neutral stimulus, before the experiments, of course, that did not cause the dogs to salivate. You ding a bell, of course the dog's not going to salivate, it doesn't associate with food. However, after repeatedly pairing the sound of the bell with the presentation of food, i.e. you give food to the dog while ringing the bell, the dogs learned to associate the sound of the bell with food and began to salivate when they heard the bell ring, even if there was no food. So the bell went from a neutral stimulus to a conditioned stimulus. And now, when the bell rings, the dog salivates. So the dog now has a conditioned response to the bell, whereas before it had an unconditioned response to the food. Unconditioned because Pavlov didn't have to do anything to get the dog to salivate for food. Dogs love food. Now, there are three main stages you should be aware of for the MCAT when it comes to classical conditioning. We've got acquisition, extinction, and spontaneous recovery. During the acquisition phase, the conditioned stimulus is paired with the unconditioned stimulus. So the bell is paired with the food, leading to the development of a conditioned response, salivation. In Pavlov's experiments, the acquisition phase involved repeatedly pairing the sound of the bell with the presentation of food until the dogs learned to associate the bell with food and then began to salivate in response to the bell. The dogs figured out that bell equal salivate. However, if we stop giving them food, eventually we will undergo what is called extinction. During the extinction phase, the conditioned stimulus, the bell ringing, is repeatedly presented without the unconditioned stimulus. There's no food, there's no reward being given, leading to a decrease in the conditioned response. In Pavlov's experiments, extinction involved repeatedly presenting the sound of the bell without the presentation of food, which led to a decrease in dogs' salivation. So an example of this would look like, imagine we've been pairing the bell and food for a while. So we just do the bell, okay, dog will salivate even though there was no food. Do it one more time, maybe the dog will salivate again. The third time, the dog is getting suspicious, but it'll still salivate. We do it a fourth time, the dog does not salivate. It gets angry. It realizes there's no food anymore when we show the bell. So we do it for a final fifth time. We do the bell and the dog does not care. It does not salivate, doesn't even come over. The dog says, you know what? This is an extinct response. I'm no longer responding to the bell. Give me food. However, even after extinction has occurred, the conditioned response can reappear in a process called spontaneous recovery. This occurs when the conditioned stimulus is presented again after a period of rest and the conditioned response reemerges, albeit a bit weaker than during the initial acquisition phase. Classical conditioning can be seen in many different contexts on the MCAT, including phobias, drug addiction, and advertising. Phobias can develop through classical conditioning when a person associates a neutral stimulus, such as a spider, with a negative experience, such as screaming, leading to a fear response to that stimulus. In drug addiction, the repeated pairing of a drug with the pleasurable effects it produces can lead to a conditioned response that causes the individual to crave that drug in the future. Finally, advertising? Advertising often uses classical conditioning to create a positive association with their products. For example, advertisers may use attractive models, catchy music, or other positive stimuli to create positive associations with a particular product, leading to a conditioned response in consumers to purchase that product. Overall, classical conditioning is a powerful form of learning that can have significant effects on behavior and perception. By understanding the basic principles of classical conditioning, you will be better able to answer complex problems on the psych-soc section of the MCAT. Thank you so much for watching our video on classical conditioning, and I will see you next time.